Welcome back to the Greenhorn Photo Taker. We are at Tillman Ravine for probably the third or fourth time over the past 2 months. This is a location that is quite wonderful. It's so beautiful here, but I really struggle with composition. So I've been determined this spring to finally get a keeper from the location, I should say. But I've been here and there've been people in the water, so that didn't work. I've been here and I've had trouble with my gear. I've been here and I've just had trouble with my compositions. So I took the morning off. It is a night of rain, so there's some nice atmosphere. It really, this is the perfect conditions that I've been looking for. So it's all on me. And today I have to get a great shot here or kind of give it up. So let me just explain why it's so difficult and why it's so beautiful for a minute. So it's an old growth forest where some of the trees around are just immense, which is very rare for New Jersey. So you're very tempted to try to include those trees in any composition. However, they're not close to the ravine itself, so you can't really get an old growth tree with any of the water in the scene. The second thing is there are these absolutely lovely rock formations with the stone jutting out from the ground. It almost looks like the back of a dragon, and then part of it's toppled over, and it is really, really lovely. But again, it's far enough away from the stream itself that it's very difficult to incorporate the flowing water while you grab those rocks. And you're also very tempted to use a wide-angle lens. And I think that's a mistake, and I think that's one of my mistakes I've made in the past. I've stood behind those dragon scales to try to get both the rocks and the stream itself in the picture, and that doesn't work. There's just something wrong with that composition. I can't put my head on it. It's very unbalanced. There's no specific focal point. I think that's the problem. You have to pick either the stream or the dragon scales. So I want to be cognizant of that this morning as well. And then finally, the other problem with this location, well, I guess two things. One, it does not work after full flow. Raging water in here is lovely to see in person, but does not lend well to the photograph itself, because you're really tempted to blur the water, and you need the stream to be at a trickle in order to blur that water. So that's difficult. And then the real thing, though, is the angle of approach here is a mess. It is a very narrow stream where you could only really shoot it from the left side if you're downstream, which puts it at an angle throughout the entire picture. So you're almost cutting across the top or the corner of the frame instead of using the whole frame. So I think what you have to do is just focus on a narrow area of the ravine itself. You know, pick out some ferns in the background or perhaps some root systems of a tree and use that as a foreground element, and try to work it that way. So I'm going to spend a few minutes taking stock of what might make for a good composition. I'm going to take my time, and we're going to give this a shot. So I think I'll use my instincts on this one. I'm not sure it's a perfect composition, but I'm going to use a wide-angle lens from about this vantage point to try to get both the pool below and the two streams of water upstream. So let me toy around with that for a minute and see if anything looks great in the back of the camera. So on the back of the camera, I don't know if this is in focus, but I am satisfied with that composition. This might be too bright, right? That might end up being a overexposed portion of the fall. And I did take a few different exposure lengths, but that's not bad as a starting point for me here today. I had to work to make sure that that area of green was right in the middle of the two forks of falls. I do like the swirling waters here. I definitely wanted to feature that. I think it's generally balanced with the two streams on the left and the swirling waters on the right. I like some of the background here. I don't love the rock cairn there, but that's what it is here, right? It's part of what coming to Tillman is. People come here as a little wading pool. So I didn't want to move that. It's part of what makes Tillman great for others. It's just part of the scene, so I felt like I needed to include that. All right, I am going to look around to see if there are other compositions that make me happy. Okay, so I've got two shots with the water. I think to complete the picture here at Tillman, I need to find something with the root systems and the rocks and maybe a large old growth tree. So I'm going to search around for a composition. Even something right here is enticing because we're below the roots, especially right here, right? This root system with this shale-like reddish rock in this area, and then some of the larger trees in the background. It won't work with a wide angle, so yeah, I gotta focus on this composition for a minute. So how did I do? The first shot is the safe shot. It is really the most common composition you'd find at Tillman's Creek, but I still like it. I did a good job, but it wasn't that creative. The second shot really threw me for a loop with how beautiful it was. I remember thinking, once I fired the first shot in back of camera, the light looked wonderful, but I didn't realize how I could tease out some of the colors on the moss and the root system on that tree to the left. The third one might be my favorite of the bunch. It features the roots of one of those old growth trees and even has a bit of the dragon scale rocks in the background. Looking a little closer at the first shot, I am satisfied with my exposure. The motion blur in the water is working for me. I like the swirls to the right of the little pond, that little eddy we'll call it, that really gives it some motion. And I don't mind the cairn. Those red rocks really just give something to tie the right hand image together. But overall, it's really just an okay shot, mainly because it is the most obvious one you can take here. Looking closer at the second shot, a few things come to mind that really grab my attention. The first is the light colored moss on the left hand side of that ledge over the ravine itself. Those yellow and green highlights really look magical to me, and is not something that I picked up on right away when scoping out the composition. And just above that tree that's growing on its side really looks great. And I did make it a point to brighten up the exposure of that trunk to specifically highlight it. But then, not to be outdone, I would think it is the moss on the right and that tree on the right in the background, where you can also see the moss growing on the root system. So overall, I'm very happy with this shot. I'd love to see this exact frame in a foggy, moody day, perhaps with a few rays of sunshine coming out. That might boost this over the edge a bit, but yeah, for this shot, for this day, extremely satisfied. And finally, here's a shot that I could stare at and have stared at for some time. It might just be me, but something definitely calls me to the beauty of this image. And it's almost entirely due to the light-colored moss on the tree trunks. And even if you look behind that tree trunk at those two rocks protruding out from the top, there's moss on those rocks as well. That is lovely. I saw it in camera. Very happy to capture it. I do wish I had worked this composition a little bit more. Is there a way to feature the rocks and the tree as two focal points? I'm not quite sure. Having two might take something away, and as it is now, it's almost like a hint of the mysteries of Tillman Ravine and Stokes State Forest, with the focal point clearly being these wonderful root systems as you climb out of the ravine area itself. So overall, I am very satisfied with my day. I think that I met the challenge of Tillman for the first time, and I could cross this one off as a problem area that I've had in the past. Okay, that was another greenhorn photography quick hit from Tillman Ravine. And while this cannot be categorized as a well-kept secret location, it can be very crowded on weekends. I do think it is underrated from a photography standpoint, and I cannot believe I'm saying that because I've struggled in this location for years. But today seemed to have the right atmosphere, and for the most part, it came together quite nicely. So thank you very much for watching. Have a great day with whatever you're doing, and get out and explore.